The forest had always been a place of peace for me. As a child, I spent countless hours wandering among the trees, listening to the birds, and feeling the crunch of leaves under my feet. But that all changed the night I encountered the wendigo. It was late fall, and the air had taken on a chill that cut right through my jacket. I had decided to spend the weekend at my family's cabin, a small, cozy place deep in the woods. I wanted some time away from the chaos of the city, a chance to clear my head and enjoy the quiet. On the first night, as I sat by the fire, I heard a strange noise outside. It was faint at first, almost like the whisper of the wind. But then it grew louder, more distinct. It sounded like someone calling my name. I shook it off, telling myself it was just my imagination, but the sound persisted, growing more urgent. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside. The cold air bit at my skin, and I shivered as I scanned the darkness. "Hello?" I called out, my breath forming small clouds in the air. There was no answer, just the rustling of leaves and the occasional creak of a tree branch. I walked a little further from the cabin, my heart pounding in my chest. The forest, usually so familiar and welcoming, now felt menacing. I could feel eyes on me, though I saw no one. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard it again, my name, clear and unmistakable. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice trembling. The beam of my flashlight flickered, and I smacked it against my hand, trying to steady the light. Suddenly, the beam caught something, a figure standing just beyond the reach of the light. It was tall and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to glow in the darkness. Its skin was stretched tight over its bones, giving it a skeletal appearance. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized I was looking at the wendigo. I had heard stories about the creature, tales told around campfires to scare children, but I had never believed them. The wendigo was supposed to be a myth, a legend. Yet here it was, standing before me, its eyes locked onto mine. I took a step back, my mind racing. I had no idea what to do. The creature moved closer, its steps slow and deliberate. I could see its breath, a cloud of white in the cold night air. It opened its mouth, and I could see rows of sharp, jagged teeth. "Leave me alone," I shouted, my voice echoing through the trees. The wendigo paused, its head tilting to the side as if considering my words. Then it let out a low, guttural growl that sent a wave of fear through me. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my ears. The forest blurred around me as I sprinted back to the cabin. I could hear the wendigo behind me, its footsteps heavy and relentless. I burst through the door and slammed it shut, my hands shaking as I locked it. For a moment, there was silence. Then the sound of scratching at the door. I backed away, my mind racing. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen and stood ready, my eyes fixed on the door. The scratching continued, growing more frantic. I could hear the creature's growls, low and menacing. I knew the door wouldn't hold forever. My only hope was to make it until morning, when the light might drive it away. Hours passed, each one feeling like an eternity. The scratching eventually stopped, but I could still hear the wendigo outside, pacing, growling. I didn't dare close my eyes, afraid of what might happen if I did. Finally, as the first light of dawn broke through the trees, the growling ceased. I waited, my body tense, until I was sure the creature was gone. Then cautiously, I opened the door. The forest was still and quiet, the only sound the chirping of birds. There was no sign of the wendigo, no tracks, no evidence it had been there at all. But I knew what I had seen, what I had heard. The stories were true. The wendigo was real. I packed my things and left the cabin that morning, not daring to look back. The forest no longer felt like home. It was a place of danger, of nightmares. I haven't been back since, and I don't plan to return. The memory of that night is enough to keep me away. The wendigo is out there, somewhere in those woods, waiting, and I know better than to tempt fate again. Growing up, Danny and I were inseparable. Our childhood was a tapestry of adventures, most of which involved hiking the wooded trails surrounding our hometown in Washington. The forests became our playground, each trail a new quest, every rustle of leaves a hint of mystery. Now, 2 decades later, we were both established professionals, Danny, a lawyer, and I, an engineer. Life had taken us in different directions, but the bond forged in those woods remained unbroken. A month ago, during one of our infrequent catch-ups, Danny proposed we revisit our old stomping grounds. The idea was irresistible. We planned a weekend trip, packed our gear, and set out for the Cascade Mountains, eager to relive our youthful escapades. The drive to the trailhead was filled with nostalgic chatter, the scenery a familiar blur of towering pines and winding roads. When we finally arrived, the air was crisp and fresh, carrying the scent of pine and earth. We shouldered our packs, exchanged grins, and started on the trail, our laughter mingling with the calls of distant birds. The first day of hiking was pure bliss. The rhythm of our steps, the crunch of leaves underfoot, and the occasional sighting of wildlife brought back memories of simpler times. We pitched our tent near a bubbling creek, cooked a modest dinner over a campfire, and spent the evening reminiscing under a canopy of stars. The next morning we woke early, eager to cover more ground. The trail grew steeper, winding through denser forest. As we climbed higher, the trees thinned, offering glimpses of snow-capped peaks. We paused often, both to catch our breath and to take in the breathtaking vistas. Around midday, we reached a plateau that offered a panoramic view of the valley below. We sat on a fallen log, munching on trail mix and soaking in the beauty around us. It was then that Danny, peering through his binoculars, froze. "Hey, take a look at this," he said, handing me the binoculars and pointing towards a distant slope. I adjusted the focus and scanned the area. At first, I saw nothing unusual, just trees and rocks. Then movement caught my eye. A large, dark figure was making its way through the forest, moving with a deliberate, almost human-like gait. "What do you think that is?" Danny asked, his voice tinged with excitement and a hint of apprehension. I lowered the binoculars and shook my head. "I don't know. A bear, maybe, but it's walking on 2 legs." We exchanged a glance, the same thought crossing our minds. Could it be a Sasquatch? The legend of Bigfoot was a staple of our childhood, a story we'd often whispered to each other during our nocturnal hikes. But neither of us had ever truly believed it. Until now. "Let's get a closer look," Danny suggested, his eyes alight with curiosity. We packed up our gear and started down the slope, moving as quietly as possible. The forest grew denser, shadows deepening as we descended. The figure had disappeared from view, but we continued in the direction we'd last seen it, our senses heightened. After about half an hour, we reached a small clearing. The underbrush was trampled, branches broken, and the air carried a faint, musky odor. We found large, humanoid footprints in the soft earth, much bigger than any humans. "Look at these," Danny said, crouching down to examine the prints. "They're huge." I nodded, my heart pounding. "This is incredible." We followed the trail for another hour, the tracks leading us deeper into the forest. The sense of being watched grew stronger with each step. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves set our nerves on edge. As we rounded a bend, we heard a low growl. We froze, straining to see through the thick foliage. Then, about 30 yards ahead, we saw it, a massive, hairy creature standing at the edge of the clearing. It was at least 8 feet tall, its body covered in dark, matted fur. Its face was partially obscured by shadows, but we could see its eyes, intelligent and wary. For a moment, time stood still. The creature stared at us, and we stared back, rooted to the spot. Then, with a sudden fluid motion, it turned and disappeared into the forest, moving with a speed and grace that belied its size. We stood there, stunned and silent, until Danny finally spoke. "Did you see that?" I nodded, still processing what we'd just witnessed. "Yeah, I saw it." We followed the trail for a while longer, but the tracks eventually vanished, lost among the rocky terrain. Reluctantly, we turned back towards our campsite, our minds racing with questions. That night, as we sat by the campfire, the forest around us seemed to buzz with life. The stars overhead were impossibly bright, the air filled with the sounds of nocturnal creatures. But our thoughts were elsewhere, replaying the encounter again and again. "Do you think anyone will believe us?" Danny asked, poking at the fire with a stick. I shrugged. I don't know, but we saw what we saw. We stayed up late talking about the implications of our sighting. The logical part of my mind struggled to reconcile what I'd seen with what I knew to be possible. But another part of me, the part that had always believed in the magic of these woods, felt a profound sense of wonder. As dawn broke, we packed up our gear and started the hike back to civilization. The trail seemed different now, imbued with a sense of mystery and possibility. We walked in companionable silence, each lost in our thoughts. When we finally reached the trailhead, we stood for a moment, taking in the view one last time. The mountains, the trees, the endless sky, all of it felt more alive, more vibrant than ever before. Same time next year? Danny asked, a grin spreading across his face. I smiled back. Definitely. We parted ways, promising to keep in touch and plan our next adventure soon. As I drove back to the city, I couldn't help but glance at the forest in my rearview mirror. The memory of that creature, the sense of awe and mystery, stayed with me. Danny and I had set out to relive our childhood, to reconnect with the land that had shaped us. We found something far more profound, a reminder that the world still holds secrets, waiting to be discovered by those willing to venture off the beaten path. And as I navigated the familiar roads back to my daily routine, I knew that our encounter with the unknown had rekindled a spark within us both. We would return to the mountains, not just for the hike, but for the chance to glimpse the extraordinary once more. It was a dreary Tuesday afternoon when I first saw them. The clouds hung low in the sky, casting an oppressive gray over the playground. Our teacher, Mrs. Williams, had given us a rare extra recess, a reward for good behavior. I remember the feeling of excitement bubbling inside me as I ran towards the swings, my sneakers kicking up little clouds of dust from the worn-out grass. I was 7 years old, and the world was still a place of wonder and mystery. The playground was our kingdom, a place where we could escape the confines of the classroom and let our imaginations run wild. But that day, something changed. That was the day I saw the black-eyed children. It started with a feeling, a sense that something was off. I was pumping my legs on the swing, trying to touch the sky with the tips of my toes, when I noticed the playground had gone eerily silent. I slowed down, letting the swing lose its momentum, and looked around. The other kids were frozen, their games abandoned, as they stared towards the edge of the playground where the trees grew thick and dark. That's when I saw them. They stood just beyond the tree line, 2 children who seemed about my age. Their clothes were strange, like something out of an old photograph, faded and worn, but it was their eyes that held me captive. They were completely black, like deep, endless voids. No whites, no pupils, just darkness. For a moment, I couldn't move. My mind struggled to process what I was seeing. It was as if my brain was trying to convince me that this was some kind of elaborate trick or a figment of my imagination. But the longer I stared, the more real they became. The boy and girl stepped forward in unison, their movements unnaturally synchronized. They were pale, almost ghostly, and their expressions were devoid of any emotion. I wanted to look away, to run, but I was rooted to the spot. "Can we play with you?" the girl asked. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried across the playground like a chilling breeze. The other kids didn't move. It was as if they were under some sort of spell. I managed to shake my head, the fear finally breaking through my paralysis. "No," I said, my voice trembling. "You're not supposed to be here." The boy tilted his head, his black eyes never leaving mine. "Please," he said, his tone matching the girl's eerie calm. "We just want to play." A shiver ran down my spine. There was something profoundly wrong about them. I couldn't explain it, but every instinct in my body screamed at me to get away. "I said no!" I shouted, finding my courage. "Go away!" The boy and girl exchanged a glance, then turned and slowly walked back into the trees, disappearing into the shadows as if they had never been there. The spell seemed to break, and the other kids began to stir, looking around in confusion. It was as if they had no memory of what had just happened. I ran to Mrs. Williams, my heart pounding in my chest. Mrs. Williams, there were some kids. They had black eyes, and they wanted to play with us. She looked at me with a mix of concern and disbelief. Black eyes? Are you sure you weren't imagining things, dear? Sometimes our minds play tricks on us. I insisted, but she just patted my shoulder and told me to join the others. No one else seemed to remember the strange children, and soon the playground was filled with laughter and shouts once more. But I couldn't forget. The image of those black eyes haunted my dreams for weeks. I avoided the edge of the playground where the trees cast their long shadows, and I kept my distance from any new kids who seemed out of place. Years later, I heard stories about black-eyed children, tales whispered in hushed tones around campfires and sleepovers. I realized that what I had seen that day was something far beyond the realm of normal childhood fears. It was something dark, something that defied explanation. To this day, I wonder what they wanted, why they chose our playground, and if they ever found another child to play with. But one thing is certain, I will never forget those eyes, and the chilling sense of dread that accompanied them. The air in Madrid was thick with summer heat as I stepped out of the taxi and onto the cobblestone street. The old hotel stood tall and majestic, its facade a blend of faded elegance and forgotten grandeur. I was drawn to it not only for its charm, but also for its history, a place where time seemed to stand still, frozen in the whispers of long-gone guests. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors and entered the lobby, the scent of aged leather and polished wood greeting me. A massive chandelier hung from the ceiling, casting a soft, warm glow over the room. The check-in desk was a relic from the past, its brass bell tarnished and its surface worn smooth by countless hands. Behind it stood an elderly man, his eyes twinkling with a mix of curiosity and wisdom. "Welcome to Hotel El Cielo," he said in a rich, melodious voice. "You must be Senor Martinez. We have been expecting you." I nodded, offering a polite smile. "Yes, that's right. I've always wanted to stay here, and I'm finally getting the chance." "Ah, a true aficionado of history," he replied, his smile widening. "We are honored to have you. Your room is ready. Allow me to show you the way." He led me up a grand staircase, the wooden steps creaking under our weight. The walls were adorned with paintings of landscapes and portraits of solemn-looking individuals, their eyes seemingly following us as we ascended. We stopped at the second floor, and the old man handed me a key, its brass handle cold and heavy in my palm. "Room 204, he said. "One of our finest. Please enjoy your stay. And if you need anything, do not hesitate to call." I thanked him and entered my room, the door closing behind me with a soft click. The room was a delightful blend of old-world charm and modern comfort. A large four-poster bed dominated the space, its white linens crisp and inviting. A writing desk stood by the window, offering a view of the bustling street below. I unpacked my belongings, savoring the sense of stepping back in time. As evening fell, I decided to explore the hotel. I wandered through the dimly lit corridors, each turn revealing more of the building's storied past. Antique furniture, ornate mirrors, and intricate tapestries adorned every corner, each piece telling its own silent tale. I found myself drawn to the lobby, now empty and quiet. I sat down on one of the plush armchairs, enjoying the solitude. The air was still, save for the occasional creak of the building settling. I closed my eyes, letting the ambience wash over me, when suddenly a cold draft swept through the room. I opened my eyes to find the chandelier swaying gently, the light flickering as if touched by an unseen hand. A chill ran down my spine, and I sat up straight, my senses on high alert. The lobby was still empty, but the air felt charged with an inexplicable energy. I heard the faint sound of footsteps, soft and deliberate, approaching from the corridor to my right. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to see who or what was coming. To my astonishment, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a woman, dressed in an elegant vintage gown. Her long hair cascaded down her back, and her eyes held a distant, sorrowful expression. She glided across the floor, her movements smooth and ethereal. I watched transfixed as she approached the front desk, her fingers brushing the surface lightly. "Excuse me," I found myself saying, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can I help you?" She turned to me, her eyes meeting mine. For a moment I felt a connection, as if she could see into the depths of my soul. Then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she began to fade, her form dissolving into the air like mist in the morning sun. I blinked, and she was gone. I sat there, stunned and unable to comprehend what I had just witnessed. Was it a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination, or had I truly seen a ghost? The questions swirled in my mind, each one more unsettling than the last. The next morning I approached the elderly man at the check-in desk. He greeted me with the same warm smile, but I could sense a knowing glint in his eyes. "Did you sleep well, Senor Martinez?" he asked. "Actually, I had a rather strange experience last night," I admitted, recounting the events in the lobby. He listened intently, nodding slowly. When I finished, he sighed and leaned closer. "You are not the first to see her," he said softly. "The woman you described is known to us. She was a guest here many years ago, a young bride who tragically lost her husband on their wedding night. She has been seen wandering the halls ever since, searching for him." I shivered, the story adding a layer of poignancy to the ghostly encounter. "Do you believe she will ever find peace?" The old man shrugged, his expression wistful. "Who can say? The past has a way of holding on to those who are not ready to let go. Perhaps she finds solace in these walls, a place where her memories live on." As the days passed, I continued my stay at Hotel El Cielo, the ghostly encounter a constant companion in my thoughts. I found myself drawn to the lobby each night, hoping to catch another glimpse of the spectral bride, but I never saw her again. It was a cold winter night, and I was bundled up in my warmest clothes. I had always dreamed of seeing the northern lights, the beautiful aurora borealis that painted the sky with colors. This was the night I had been waiting for. I drove far away from the city, away from the bright lights, to a quiet spot in the mountains where the sky was dark and clear. As I stood there, the cold air biting my cheeks, I felt a sense of excitement. The stars were twinkling like tiny diamonds, and the moon shone brightly, lighting up the snowy ground. I set up my camera to capture the magical lights, hoping to take some beautiful pictures. After a while, I saw it. The sky started to glow with colors I had never seen before. Greens, pinks, and purples danced across the sky, swirling and twisting like a giant, colorful ribbon. I was mesmerized. I couldn't believe how beautiful it was. It felt like a dream. As I watched in awe, something strange happened. A bright light appeared in the sky, much brighter than the northern lights. At first I thought it was a shooting star, but it didn't move like one. It hovered in the sky, getting brighter and brighter. My heart started to race. This was not normal. This was something different. The light began to move slowly across the sky. It was round and glowed with a soft white light. It moved smoothly, unlike any airplane or helicopter I had ever seen. I grabbed my camera and started taking pictures. My hands were shaking with excitement and a little bit of fear. As the object moved closer, I could see it more clearly. It was a UFO. I had heard stories about UFOs before, but I never thought I would see one myself. The object was big and round, with lights all around it. It made no sound at all, just floated silently in the sky. I was both scared and fascinated. The UFO hovered above the trees, and for a moment it felt like time stood still. The northern lights were still dancing in the background, making the scene even more surreal. I watched as the UFO slowly descended and hovered just above the ground. My curiosity got the better of me, and I took a few steps closer. Suddenly, a beam of light shot down from the UFO, lighting up the ground below. The light was so bright that I had to shield my eyes. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. What was happening? Was this some kind of sign? I didn't know what to think. The light beam stayed on for a few moments, then slowly retracted back into the UFO. The object began to rise again, moving back up into the sky. I watched in amazement as it ascended higher and higher. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, it shot off into the distance, disappearing into the night sky. I stood there stunned. Did I really just see a UFO? It all happened so fast, yet it felt like an eternity. I looked around, half expecting someone to appear and tell me it was all a joke. But I was alone, standing in the snow, the northern lights still glowing above me. I quickly checked my camera. I had taken several pictures, but I wasn't sure if any of them captured the UFO. My hands were still shaking as I scrolled through the images. To my relief, there it was. The bright light, the round object, everything. I had proof of what I saw. I stayed out there for a little while longer, watching the aurora borealis, but my mind kept going back to the UFO. What did it mean? Where did it come from? I had so many questions and no answers. I knew that when I told people about this, some might not believe me, but I had seen it with my own eyes, and I had the pictures to prove it. When I finally got back home, I couldn't wait to tell my friends and family about my incredible experience. I showed them the pictures, and they were amazed. Some were skeptical, but I didn't mind. I knew what I had seen. That night changed my life. I felt like I was part of something bigger, something mysterious. The northern lights were beautiful, but the UFO made the night unforgettable. I still think about it often, wondering if I will ever see something like that again. Whenever I look up at the night sky now, I feel a sense of wonder. There is so much out there that we don't know. The universe is full of mysteries, and I was lucky enough to witness one of them. The night of the aurora borealis and the UFO will stay with me forever.